My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas.
Welcome to Mind Over Murder. To complement the new podcast that we're running every Monday, we are reaching back to 2021 for this episode, which discusses Ron Little and the Colonial Parkway Murders. We think this would be a great way to listen to where we were in May 2021 regarding our knowledge of Ron Little's involvement in the Colonial Parkway Murders, together with the episodes that are currently running, covering new information and new questions that you as listeners have had regarding the Colonial Parkway Murders. We hope you enjoy this bonus episode of Mind Over Murder. And as always, thanks for listening and for your support.
Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
Welcome to another episode of Mind Over Murder. We are starting with a big announcement. By special request, we have been asked to share the contents of the Ron Little letter. So today we are going to put on our drama hat. Some of us are more dramatic than others. And we are going to share with you the contents of the Ron Little letter. We are also going to take listener questions, of which there have been many. This seems to have been a bit of a bombshell for our listeners.
Some people didn't know about Ron Little or Liberty Security and its potential links to the Colonial Parkway Murders. A lot of folks have never seen the letter. We will put up the letter itself in the show notes for this episode. Kristin's going to read the letter, and then I'll provide color commentary.
So I will put on my drama hat. I've been practicing all day, she said facetiously. Yeah, we will provide you, because it is such a long letter and because it is so light on paragraphing, there will be times when we'll stop and just offer some commentary. I'll try to make it not in the middle of a sentence. This is much more of I think we called it a diatribe last time rather than a letter.
You used a word which I really like and don't hear often enough. I think you used the word screed.
Yes, it's definitely that too. So we'll go ahead and start by letting you all know the number of people, the vast number of people to whom Ron Little actually sent this letter. There is a I don't suppose you'd call it a top sheet because it's at the end of the letter, but there is a page that says copies of this letter are being sent to, and that it includes a numbered list of 14 recipients of this massive letter. In numerical order, Ron Little sent this letter to Oprah, Sally Jesse Raphael, 2020, 60 Minutes, West 57th Street. I'm not sure what's there. Bill, you lived in New York. Do you know what's at West 57th Street?
It's where CBS studios are located. We've actually been there to shoot television series about the Colonial Parkway Murders. I went to those studios with Joyce Call and other family members a couple of years ago when we did a television show about the Parkway case. So, West 57th Street is a now canceled CBS television show, if I'm not mistaken. It was a news program, sort of like 60 Minutes or one of those.
Oh, okay. Number 6 was A Current Affair, The Washington Post, WVEC TV 13, Norfolk, Virginia, Wavy TV 10, Norfolk, Virginia, and WTKR TV 3, Norfolk, Virginia. It was also sent to local Congressman Herb Bateman, Senator Paul Tribble, the New Zealand Embassy, and President George Bush.
And although the letter is undated, it was sent in late summer 1989, is my recollection, shortly before Ron Little was deported back to New Zealand.
All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. We've got 7 pages worth of letter to get through here, so Let's see how we do. We'll go ahead and start. Let me introduce myself. I am Ronald Little. In February 1985, I came to America from New Zealand. Since 1987, I have been harassed and treated abusively by the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the FBI, and ATF. At this time, although I have committed no crimes, I have had my New Zealand passport confiscated, my permit to work has been revoked, so I am not allowed to work or collect unemployment, and the INS will not allow me to return to New Zealand. My family has been threatened by government agencies. Would you please take a few minutes to read my story? Maybe you could help me or lead me to someone or some agency that can assist me. Thank you for your time and any assistance you render. Sincerely, Ronald Little. So this is a cover letter that accompanies the real letter. Any thoughts on that, Bill?
He starts off, I think this is a cry for help, and he's claiming to be harassed by these three agencies, INS, FBI, and ATF. Although, interestingly, ATF is mentioned in the cover note only, but as you'll discover as we go through the letter, the ATF, I don't think ever shows up again. It's just that one time.
No, it is just the one time. Page 1 of the letter. On February 20th, 1985, I excitedly boarded a jumbo jet in Auckland, New Zealand. My life's dream was about to come true. I was going to the United States of America, a country where dreams are made and anybody has a chance to make something of their lives, even those who made mistakes in their younger years. The trip took 21 hours, all of which I was awake. How could I sleep? My heart was pounding and my face strained with a smile from ear to ear, my eyes wide and shining bright, full of wonderment of what was to come in this foreign land of Mickey Mouse, John Wayne, and Jacqueline Bisset, my teenage fantasy. A place where buildings rose up into the clouds and roads were 8 lanes across, a far cry from a country where sheep outnumber people 30-1. A country where America is a picture on television or a big screen at the movies, where everyone is a millionaire or a movie star, a place where people join together against all odds and make a difference, a place in a child's dream. He's putting it on a little thick there.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Here we are. I know there aren't really paragraphs, but man, he's laying it on thick.
Yeah, these are some extensive sentences too. Little did I know on that day that my life would be shattered. My dreams turned to nightmares, my hopes of a good life, a second chance wrenched from my grip. This golden country of fairness and opportunity turned into an arena where aliens are kept like animals in cages, where rights cease to exist and you become playthings, where a government agency is the same as a Gestapo unit, where rules don't exist for them, or if they do, no one has the courage to enforce them. An agency that entraps, tricks, threatens defenseless women and children into obeying their demands just so they may say, "Oh, good we are." This agency is known as the INS, the Department of Immigration and Naturalization Services. Scary, huh? You better believe it, because they have no rules or regulations enforced upon them, just like the Nazi secret police. They just do what they want because no one will stand up to them. Why do I make these claims, you may well ask? Well, read on, my friends, and become educated. It's a fast and hard course, but I promise you will retain what you learn for life. Yep. Sorry, I had to take a breath there for a minute.
Please continue.
Before I go on, I want to say that I don't hate America or Americans. I just can't believe that in a country of freedom and democracy, an agency, especially a government agency, can act this way and no one will do anything about it. We condemn the Nazi Gestapo, yet we condone its tactics here in the USA in our government agencies. Again, I feel like he's laying it on a little thick.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the INS, but there's a solid layer of something being laid down here.
Okay, so that's the end of a first large block of text. Like we have said, there are no paragraphs. And as this goes on, it continues to even lack spacing, but that is one large block. So now I'm going to move into my second large block. Now, let's get to the root of this problem. Upon my arrival in the USA, I lived with my fiancé in Tracy, California. We were married on April 20th, 1985. This marriage did not work out, and my wife left me. I was suddenly alone in a strange country, not having any family or close friends, but I kept going. I moved to Gloucester, Virginia in February 1986. I went to TNCC, that's Thomas Nelson Community College, for anybody who's not familiar with the area, to obtain my state registration as a security officer and then as a private investigator. I was placed on the academic merit list at TNCC, getting the highest possible scores in both fields. I worked as a security officer for Liberty Security Services, Inc. After just 6 short months, I was promoted to lieutenant, then 3 months after this to captain. Then 5 months later, I owned the company. I changed the name to Advanced Security and Investigations.
Let me add a couple of things here.
Yeah.
Here's where I think BS ends and flat out lies begin, because Little is not mentioning the fact that he does reference making mistakes as a younger man. But as we understand it, he's actually a convicted felon in New Zealand. And he was, I believe, not honest in his application to come here to the United States, because had he admitted that he was a convicted felon, he would not have been permitted entry into the United States. Further, when he registered in the Virginia state registration process for work as a security officer and a private investigator, again, they would have asked him questions about whether or not he'd been convicted of a crime, which, as we understand it, he had. It would appear that he was not forthright about the fact that he had a criminal background in his native New Zealand, and he's more than glossing over those points.
I'm interested in the fact that he has given himself titles of lieutenant and then captain. Is that typically something that one sees in a private security agency?
I'm not an expert on all things private security, but we have received new information in the last few months from people that were intimately involved in Liberty Security and the operations thereof, who have said that the supposed sale of Liberty Security from the man that had established the company, John Knight Hawthorne, whom we mentioned last week, to Ron Little, may have actually been a straw man purchase. In other words, it appears that they were having some financial difficulty that had something to do with, it almost sounds like a workers' comp claim or something like that. Someone had gotten injured on the job, and they were finding their insurance costs had increased tremendously, according to our sources. The decision to sell, and I'm putting quotes around that, the company from John Hawthorne to Ron Little appears to be one of those kind of on-paper only sales. John Knight Hawthorne actually continued to co-own the company and be a silent partner, with Ron Little then being put out front as the new owner. And I think the decision to rename the company Liberty Security and then have a new owner, and then it's called Advanced Security. We even have a copy of Ron Little's original business card from this time frame. We think that's an attempt to get out from under financial obligations under the Liberty Security name, and that's why the company was changed. So again, I think Little may be glossing over what really happened.
This next section of text is very long, and it does get into all of the particulars of his associations with people who were either victims in the Colonial Parkway murders or were victims in Colonial Parkway murders adjacent cases. So this is Ron Little actually laying out the case against himself by himself. I hired a secretary/receptionist named Lori Ann Powell. On December 4th, 1987, a friend and former workmate of mine, Brian Pettinger, went missing from a dance studio in Hampton, Virginia. Seeing as he was a friend, I got involved in trying to find Brian. Well, on February 2nd, 1988, Brian's body was found in the James River, wrists and ankles bound by rope. He had been murdered. To this day, it is not known why. During this investigation of Brian's disappearance, I discovered that Robin M. Edwards, aged 14 years, was found shot to death, along with David L. Knobling, aged 20. They were also found in the James River in Isle of Wight County. This happened in September 1987. It turned out that Robin's mother had worked for Liberty Security also, as did Brian Pettinger and, of course, myself. Then early on the morning of March 9th, my secretary, Lori Ann Powell, aged 18 years, disappears. I also got involved in trying to find Lori's body was found in the James River on April 2nd, 1988, apparently stabbed to death. On April 9th, 1988, Keith Call, aged 20 years, and Cassandra Haley, aged 19 years, disappeared on the Colonial Parkway in York County. Keith Call's pickup truck was found with both his and Cassandra's clothing on the seat of the vehicle. They have not been found to this day.
He makes a mistake regarding what kind of vehicle Keith Call was driving, but let's keep going and see how he lays this out.
He also spells Keith's name wrong. I'd just like to note that.
Yeah.
I am, by this time, fully involved in investigating what is going on. I made a statement to the press that if Lori turned up dead in the James River, that I would be convinced that all these disappearances and murders were linked. She did turn up dead, and in the James. Now my statement was turned around. Now I knew exactly where she would turn up, so how could I possibly know this unless I was somehow involved? This led to local deputies, state police, and FBI asking me questions. The fear in local people from Gloucester now led to my business being impossible to operate because people suddenly feared and hated me. Why? Because I was the odd one out, the new guy, the foreigner that no one knew anything about. I became a scapegoat, seeing nothing else turned up in the way of leads or arrests. I went to work for Ames, which is a department store. Then the publicity got so bad that people refused to work with me. So I had to be transferred to another store in another area. In March 1988, the INS and the FBI came to my job in Newport News, Virginia to question me. I was arrested by INS for being an illegal alien, but was released immediately and told to report to the INS office in Norfolk, Virginia, the following Monday. This happened on a Friday afternoon. The INS agent searched my briefcase and confiscated my New Zealand passport and my 9mm Smith & Wesson Model 469. They, being FBI, then asked if they could look through my car. I said yes. I have nothing to hide. They did this right outside my job. They confiscated some undeveloped rolls of film belonging to me, some of my wife's jewelry, along with samples of human hair from the seats, floor, and a blanket in the back of the car. They took a pair of gloves of mine also. They did not give me a receipt for any items they took, and to this day, nothing has been returned to me. In fact, when I asked for it, I was told by Wolfinger, headman for FBI in Norfolk, that he did not know where it was, so I would have to wait until they contacted me for its return.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder. We're not, by the way, ever implying that Little is involved in any of these murders. He inserts himself over and over again. And we've spoken to Brian Pettinger's widow, and she clearly indicated that he came to her family, he volunteered his services, and said that he would help figure out who had killed Brian Pettinger. We've spoken with Lori Ann Powell's family recently, and her parents indicated he did the same thing. Later on, as he was supposedly reporting back to Brian Pettinger's widow, he behaved in a grossly inappropriate manner towards her. He was actually hitting on her while he is supposedly assisting her family in finding her husband, who was missing for days at this point. I think this is his version of consoling the widow or what have you. He complains about the fact that people look at him suspiciously, but he keeps putting himself in the middle of these murder investigations, which is why he ends up on everyone's radar. I understand from an FBI, local law enforcement perspective, Virginia State Police, and even INS, why people were looking at him with such suspicion, because he put himself right there in the middle of it.
And as Fitz said in our last episode, this is something that some serial killers will do, will insert themselves into the investigation to get their rocks off or have their jolly or whatever it is. Yeah, I can definitely understand why the FBI would kind of look at him and go, "What's up with you, dude?" I get it.
He's also skipped over something again. Remember, the letter starts off with him having a very brief marriage in California. In this letter, he references his wife. This is now wife number 3, who was 18 years old at the time they were married, and I believe he was 32. He references this latest wife without indicating when that relationship began. And just his wife's jewelry, I think, is how it comes up. And he complains about things that it appears were confiscated by the FBI. He may actually have some legitimate complaints mixed in here, but he always seems to be skipping over key detail. And with this pattern of constantly inserting himself into the middle of these murder investigations, he ends up attracting the wrong kind of attention.
We are now on page 4 of the letter. Again, no paragraphs. No indentation.
It just goes on.
It just goes on. And if there are times when I pause or stumble, it's because I'm having a little bit of a hard time without some of the punctuation that needs to be here.
Yes.
My wife and I reported to INS as requested that following Monday morning. My wife filled out a petition for me to become a permanent resident, seeing as since I was divorced from my first wife, my first petition was now void. After doing the necessary paperwork with INS, they told me that the FBI wanted me up on the next floor. My wife and I went up to see what they wanted. When we got there, they said that they wanted to fingerprint me. I asked why. They said it was just routine. I said, okay. This they proceeded to do. They took my whole palm print, fingertips, in between my fingers, the sides. Then came the strangest request of all. They asked me to remove my clothing so that they could photograph my tattoos on my body. I asked why, and they replied again that it was routine. I then said, no, it's not routine. In fact, I have never heard of this before. So I said that I would not remove my clothing, but I would verbally tell them what tattoos I had. They again requested that I remove my clothing. I said, go to hell. They settled for me telling them verbally. I then talked to an attorney friend of mine who said that he also had never heard of such a request. I then put it together. They wanted the photographs of my body and tattoos so that they could identify my body should I turn up dead, as they do not have dental records and such. I'm not sure what to make of that, Bill.
I think this is a real stretch. I actually think they really did want him to show them all of the identifying marks on his body, but I don't think this was about them planning on him being dead at any point in the near future.
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous.
That smacks of paranoia to me. During this period, my marriage was put through an irreparable amount of tension and damage, which led to us separating after our son was born August 10th, 1988. I was afraid at how people would treat my wife and baby, or that they would get hurt should people try to hurt me, which was the talk on the street at the time. Again, I'm not sure if I believe that, Bill.
He has a tendency to really lay things on thick.
Many people I knew and never had problems with suddenly turned away when I approached, or people made or yelled threatening gestures to me in passing. Yes, I feared for my life and that of my family. In fact, I wore a bulletproof vest whenever I left the house, just in case.
Pardon me.
I'm rolling my eyes.
Yeah, I'm rolling my eyes too. I think people can hear it right through the podcast.
Probably. On May 10th, 1989, I was again arrested by INS. For what? So far, I'm not 100% sure. I have been told that it was because I no longer lived with my wife and son, but we all know that this is not a crime. Then I was told it was because my wife had withdrawn her petition. But this they forced her to do by going to her residence at 6:30 a.m. on Monday, May 10th, 1989, and telling her that if she did not sign a paper for them, she would be arrested and be put in jail, possibly for 5 years, because our marriage was a sham. They also told her to sign another form stating that I was dangerous to society and that she feared for her life from me. This she refused to sign. They then came to my job to arrest me. This happened at 8:45 a.m. on May 10th, 1989. I'm kind of surprised he remembers those times because I can't remember what I'm doing from 1 minute to the next.
He has a pretty good command of detail. It's just that, as I've pointed out several times now, there are lots of key things that he will leave out because they are not beneficial to his story.
They threw me up against my car, patted me down, handcuffed me, proceeded to search my car, ignoring my request to see a search warrant. They then pushed me into the back seat of their car, and we left the Ames parking lot. We drove to Richmond, where they picked up another illegal alien from the jail there. Then they left both of us sitting in the car in 80 to 85 degree heat for about 1.5 hours. I had on a leather jacket, which I could not remove because I was handcuffed, and I was sweating profusely. I was in the back of that car like that for about I can't tell what he's doing here, 5 and 1.
I think he means 5 1/2.
5 and 1.5 hours. Okay, that was a little weird. I was then taken to Rappahannock Security Center in Fredericksburg, Virginia, an INS holding institution. We arrived there at around 2:30 p.m. We were booked in and given prison blues. I had $170 cash on me when they booked me in. After being held for 1 week without knowing what I was charged with, I wrote to the superintendent advising him that as of that day, I was on a hunger strike and would remain so until my embassy talked to me. My eyes are rolling again. Are yours?
He's got a flair for drama.
After 4 days of not eating, I was taken to top security. They said it was so they could keep an eye on me and my condition. When this happened, I also stopped taking any fluids and began dehydrating rapidly. My hunger strike lasted 10 days, 6 of which I had no fluids. I lost 28 pounds in those 10 days. I began drinking again only because I was informed that I had a bond reduction hearing the next morning in Arlington, Virginia. So I drank grapefruit juice to restore the potassium to my body. My bond was set at $5,000 cash by INS Norfolk on my arrest. At Arlington, it was reduced to $1,000 by the immigration judge, and I was out of jail that evening. But the jail informed me that they had forgotten to write me a check for the money they had of mine, now balancing $143.70, after spending some of the original $170 on canteen items like shampoo and conditioner, writing materials, and such. So I would have to leave without any money, but at least I had someone picking me up, so I should be okay to get home. I wonder what would have happened if I didn't have someone to pick me up. That was May 26, 1989. It is now June 7th, and my money has still not been returned to me. Why? I do not know. My permit to work has been revoked, so I am not allowed to work. I cannot collect unemployment because INS revoked my work permit, so I am ineligible for employment. To hire an attorney to defend me will cost $10,000 to $15,000, as quoted to me by 2 different attorneys. I can't work. I can't pay them. I also can't pay child support for my son, nor can I support myself legally. So what can I do? I can't leave the country to go back to New Zealand. I was in the process of doing that, and that is why INS arrested me. My embassy telephoned me on May 9th to tell me that they had my passport and that I could pick it up at any time. I decided to get it the next day, but I was arrested before I had the chance. I would have left the USA on or about May 28, 1989, bound for New Zealand. I was told by INS that if I left voluntarily, I could come back, and they were not going to let this happen. They were going to deport me so that I could never return. They lied to my embassy and anybody else they spoke to. That's my story, and I don't know if you'll even read it. But if you do, and you're at this part of it, all I have to say is if you have any ideas whatsoever as to what I can do, please let me know. I have given up begging for help. I'm even at the point where nothing else can surprise me. But I have one thing in my favor, and that is I did investigate the murders, and I happen to know a lot of things, including the fact that someone needs to ask a certain government agent a few questions as to what he was doing while these people were vanishing and showing up dead. Any idea who he might be referencing there, Bill?
I'm not sure. You sure wish that he'd been a bit more specific in this regard, because if he's accusing a government agent of being involved in the Colonial Parkway murders, that's one thing. Or perhaps is he saying that this government agent has failed to follow up in terms of appropriate investigation of these murders and disappearances? He's not very clear.
I actually had to stop right in the middle of that line, so let me go again with that. I did investigate the murders. I happen to know a lot of things, including the fact that someone needs to ask a certain government agent a few questions as to what he was doing while these people were vanishing and showing up dead, and why a lot of questions have not yet been answered, or why no arrests have been made in any of these or other related cases, and how come he's always around or involved in these cases. That's a run-on sentence, Ron. Shame on you. I believe this certain agent may be involved in this whole mess, but if I say anything, I die. And now I have no other choice because my life is ruined anyway, and I believe the only reason I am alive today is because I had so much press attention and that I have shut up until now. I need someone to listen to my story, someone who cares, and someone who can make a difference. I have written to Paul Tribble to no avail. I have written to Herb Bateman to no avail. But I have never, until now, got it all down on paper. I know that this is America, and it's a good country, and I still believe someone can make a difference if I could only find that someone. On June 8th, 1989, the check from the jail for the $143.71 owed to me arrived in the mail. I spoke to my attorney today, June 9th, 1989. He informed me that he had spoken with INS agent, it looks like Soker, who had told me that INS, along with ATF, were intent on charging me with felony firearms violations, a total of 12 charges, 6 different guns and their bullets, each charge holding a 5-year jail sentence and or a $10,000 fine, or both. They've been trying to do this now for 1.5 years. They even offered me a deal that if I left the USA, they would not pursue these charges. They do not want me out of this country. Sokor also said that it was normal practice to set the deportation hearing date immediately after the bond reduction hearing. But in this case, it was overlooked, a mistake. I ask, why is it that everything that can go wrong does? Every mistake that is made on my case, because it's on purpose to lengthen my stay in this country in the hope that they may find something else on me. Ronald Little. If you are sincerely interested only, you may contact me at, and I'm not going to read the number.
There's some things about this that I think don't make sense, because Little claims that the INS, the ATF, he drops the FBI, at least in the last paragraph, that they are trying to keep him in the country. If anything, from a family member's perspective, I actually think it would have been better had the federal authorities kept Little in the United States. Unfortunately, in August 1989, they deported him back to his native New Zealand, which I see as an unfortunate decision. I guess there's a possibility that there was a lack of coordination between INS, ATF, and FBI, and the Immigration and Naturalization Service went ahead and deported Little, which is unfortunate from my perspective, because it does sound like he had information and possibly could have been involved in some of these murders and disappearances. Certainly, as we discussed, he inserted himself in these cases in a very disturbing way. Now, as we mentioned last week, we have new information that Ron Little may have possibly made his way back into the United States via Canada. That in and of itself is a very interesting possibility. But he does seem to insert himself in these murder and disappearance cases in a very interesting way.
Absolutely, he does. That's going to conclude today's discussion about Ron Little and Liberty Securities, but we will continue this discussion in a later episode. Thank you so much for listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.